Hi everyone, welcome to Take Charge. I'm Blaze, the new host of Take Charge, which is a global community for those in the battery and electrification sectors. We get people on boards to talk about the founding and funding stories, how we can solve talent challenges, and essentially just the latest innovations in the space. So without further to introduce Rick, Luebbe. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Blaze. Happy to be here.
Awesome. For those listening, could you introduce yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm Rick Luebbe. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Group14 Technologies. We're an advanced battery materials company making silicon battery anodes to drive the electrification of everything on silicon battery.
Awesome stuff. And I guess just let's go back to the beginning, kind of the origin story. You kind of spun out of Energy 2. What was the belief that drove you and your co-founder, Rick, as well, to take a bet on silicon?
Yeah, so we've been in the battery space for a long time. So Energy 2 was our original battery materials company founded back in, 2003, so 22 years ago. Focused on carbon electrode materials for ultracapacitors and lead-acid batteries. And using that platform, we identified an approach to stabilize silicon for applications in lithium-ion batteries. And the ability to do that really differentiated the performance of lithium-ion batteries so much, and it was such a compelling opportunity. We really shifted off of the pure carbon electrode and shifted to this silicon carbon composite approach and leaned all in on silicon about 10 years ago or so. And that's been the focus since 2015.
Definitely. And I guess historically then, from what I'm told by people in the industry, silicon anodes, they had a bit of a challenge around kind of expansion, kind of within the battery. What have we done at Group14? How have we been able to get around that?
Sure. So, silicon is significantly higher capacity than graphite. And let me just give a little bit of a explanation about why that matters. If you look at a traditional lithium-ion battery, you have an anode and a cathode. The cathode is what brings the lithium, right? And so it's all the different formulations you hear about with cobalt and manganese and of course the lithium, et cetera, et cetera. The anode is traditionally graphite, kind of run-of-the-mill graphite. But that graphite anode takes up 60% of the volume of the cell. And so that only leaves you about 40% of the volume of the cell for the cathode. But the cathode is what brings the lithium, and the lithium determines the energy density. And so if the industry could find a way to shrink that anode using a higher capacity anode material, that leaves more room in the same sized battery for more cathode, and you get a much higher capacity battery. So silicon by weight's about 10 times higher capacity than graphite, and by volume about 3 times higher capacity. So really attractive as a potential alternative to graphite to allow much, much higher energy density. But the problem traditionally with silicon is when it lithiates, that is when the lithium moves into the silicon structure, the silicon expands a lot. Pure silicon fully lithiated can expand up to 3 times its initial volume. And so you just can imagine the mechanical, electrochemical stresses on the battery with all that called breathing, if you will, of the anode expanding and contracting. It just didn't work. You couldn't get cycle life that was reasonable for commercialization. So it really put a lot of, pressure on the desire to use silicon, and hence the opportunity to create the silicon carbon composite.
Nice. Love to hear it. And I guess in your view then, what makes Group14's silicon battery technology stand out to, compared to your competitors?
Yeah, so fundamentally it's the performance. And so what we did with our foundational understanding of microporous carbons, these nanostructured carbons, is we created a carbon scaffold. And then we use gaseous silicon called silane to effectively grow silicon in these nanopores, these really, really small pores, too small to see even with an electron microscope, in the pores of this carbon particle. And we only fill the pores about halfway. And so now when the silicon lithiates and expands, it simply expands inside the particle. The particle itself doesn't really expand. And so we've effectively insulated the battery from the expansion and contraction of the silicon. And hence, we don't put those electrochemical mechanical stresses on the cell, and we get cycle life in some cases even better than graphite. And so fundamentally, it works. It works, and it really boosts performance. So we get a boost in energy density up to about 50%, which is absolutely incredible in the battery space. But I think what's more compelling, and we can talk more about, is this ability to do extreme fast charging. And so turns out with lithium-ion battery, the reason it's so kind of takes so long to charge it is the graphite fundamentally does not like to charge. It really kind of fights those lithium ions coming over into the anode. Swap that out for silicon. Silicon is really a fantastic receiver of these lithium ions, and so you can use super ultra fast charging with the silicon-based batteries. One example, we've got one of our customers is got a standard lithium-ion battery sized cell, about the same energy density as lithium ion. So they've optimized for charge performance over energy density, but still as good as a current lithium-ion battery. They can charge that cell from 0 to 100% in 90 seconds. So you think about the implications of really flash charging these high energy density cells, really changes the way we think about energy storage for a lot of applications. So kind of back to your question, what differentiates Group14? Fundamentally, our performance is fantastic. So, as I said, much higher energy density, the enablement of extreme fast charging, and fundamentally lower cost on a dollars per kilowatt hour basis, which is what most kind of consumers of battery technology are looking for. And so performance is superior in all respects to anything else available on the market. And then second, what differentiates us is we're the first mover. And so we've got the most capacity online today and the most capacity under construction. And so that allows us to participate kind of in a global scale ahead of most other competitors in the space.
Definitely. I think scale's really the key here, which is what I really wanted to ask you about. We've all seen the headlines. You've bought the facility in kind of South Korea. And why was this such a strategic move for Group kind of 14, and how does this fit into your kind of global footprint?
Yeah, so the battery technology is global, right? So it is certainly a global industry in almost every respect. It's also strategic, right? So different regions really need to have a domestic battery capability. Right now, 80% of battery manufacturing, maybe even more, is focused in Asia, in between China, Korea, and Japan. And so if you look outside of Asia, US and Europe really struggling to establish their own battery industries in order to be able to have the strategic security of being access to those technologies for own economic growth and purposes. And so recognizing it is a strategic global industry, it's important to have manufacturing in all the major regions that both make and consume batteries. And so our focus is really where cars are made. And so that's where most of the battery industry is locating. And so, of course, cars are made in the US, Europe, Japan, Korea, and China for the most part. And so recognizing those are the kind of the focus areas of battery technology where the customers are, we need production in each of those three regions, Asia, US, and Europe. And so we've got 2 of our production modules under construction here in the US, should be finished up here pretty soon. Together, that's about 20 gigawatts worth of battery materials, enough for a couple 100,000 to maybe 500,000 EVs. We've got a silane plant we've acquired in Germany. So that's going to be our foundational, our footprint for expansion in Europe. So that's moving forward pretty aggressively. And then, as you mentioned, we acquired our full ownership of a joint venture we had in Korea with SK Group. And that's 1 production module, so 10 gigawatts of output. That factory's finished and in production today. And so that gave us access to all 3 major regions where batteries and automobiles are produced, and also gave us access to the China market. And frankly, again, 70-80% of the battery supply chain is in China. There's tremendous uncertainty with trade today, global trade. And so really important for customers to know that they can access multiple sources of critical products. And so recognizing that a lot of those customers would not want material from the US, and also recognizing our US customers are probably going to consume everything we can make in US anyway. It's important to have some differentiated opportunities to supply those customers. And so we recognize strategically full ownership of that joint venture was really important to our growth strategy. And so we're able to affect that transaction with SK Group.
Definitely. And I just know with a kind of global kind of view that you're kind of taking, that global supply chain kind of model, it's probably the most important kind of thing to have, to be fair. What do you reckon are the biggest challenges in meeting energy demand at scale?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to look at that. I think probably the fundamental biggest problem from a general energy demand equation is just the availability of power. And so, as we electrify everything, we need more power. And now we're competing with things like AI data centers. And so really interesting kind of evolution of technology is as that kind of the adoption of AI accelerates, the need for these AI-empowered data centers growing and putting a lot of strain on a lot of grids. Likewise, as we electrify automotive, electrify other applications, aviation, et cetera, we're going to require more and more power. And so I think that is beginning to be recognized as something that needs to be solved and solved quickly. And there's solutions, right? We have small nuclear reactors. We have lots of solar, wind. People even talking about putting in gas-powered peaker plants, at least as they're waiting for some of these nuclear power options to come online. So a lot of focus on how to meet that demand, but I think that's the single biggest challenge. I'd say that the second challenge from my perspective in terms of electrification, which is kind of the way I think about it, is perception, right? There's a perception out there that electrifying something means it's a compromise. And it's kind of weird to me that people think of it that way, because truly electrification is really advanced technology, bring more capability, higher performance, more flexibility. And so I think as this perception starts to shift that, hey, an EV is actually significantly better than internal combustion. It's faster, it's quieter, it's less maintenance, it's less expensive, in the long term. I think we'll begin to see a more comfortable adoption curve on EVs. Today, it seems like we still have the earlier adopters are electrifying, and then the mid-tier and the late adopters are still kind of wondering what all this EV talk is about. So as soon as they begin to realize the benefits, I think we'll see that accelerate.
Definitely, Rick. And I think if you look at kind of headlines over the last couple of years, you kind of hear perceptions, kind of opinions that kind of go in all directions. What is kind of key is that sales are just increasing, that adoption is happening. The electrification is here. And yeah, kind of when you go into kind of AI data centers, the demand's just grown exponentially, to be fair. So we need more. We need scale. That seems to be it.
That's really the challenge that we have today as well, is how do we scale fast enough to even keep up with the industry? So you think about our situation, right? We're making silicon anodes. Our customers are adopting them as fast as we can make the material. But at the same time, the industry is growing 15, 20% per year on an already well-established base. And so the pace at which we need to grow just to keep up with the growth of the market is pretty significant. And when I think about how do we actually continue to take more and more market share, it's all about how do we accelerate the pace of commercialization and the pace of building out production facilities. It's really mind-boggling when I run the math on how many factories we have to build and how quickly, in order to start to take more and more market share and drive the kind of the adoption of silicon battery technology. It's fundamentally superior in every way. The only constraint on silicon battery adoption is the availability of silicon anode material. And so that's in my mind the biggest challenge for us to go after right now.
Nice. And how do you look about, I guess, achieving that, Rick?
Yeah, so it's we've got a great start. So we've got production modules finishing up here in Washington State. We've got our Korean footprint started there, and we can grow from that foundation. We've got a foothold in Europe now. Now it's about capital, and so we just, as you know, we just raised a round here in the last month or two. That helps, but again, like factories are expensive. They pay back quick, but that upfront capital to get them going is significant. And so kind of balancing that drive to commercialize and get to scale and get to profitability with the real fundamental desire to build more factories faster is one of our strategic challenges we have right now.
No, definitely. And look, the Series D that you raised, incredible, not to be sniffed at all, Rick. So kudos for that. But what on like a personal level, you founded the organization. What did it mean for you? And yeah, does that allow you to kind of get, help you through that next kind of phase of growth?
Yeah. So it's I've been doing this for a long time now, and I have to say it is really fun. It's been a fantastic journey over the last 22 years in the battery space. And it's interesting how my experience and my kind of strategic focus has shifted as we've developed this fundamentally new technology and as the market began to adopt it. And now as we're shifting from kind of an R&D organization to a large scale, effectively chemical production company, it's been an interesting growth for both me and the company. And so now, we view ourselves as a large scale materials producer, and with all the challenges and opportunities we see with that kind of scale. So lots of opportunities for profitability, but also lots of challenges on how do we scale quickly, how do we scale safely, and how do we take advantage of this market opportunity in front of us. And so, right now it is, I say we balance two things. We balance accelerating growth to take advantage of this market opportunity with safety, right? Safety is really critically important here at Group14, and we are making these materials, and we are full-fledged production facilities, and so that's a real important focus for us as we grow as well.
Definitely. So if we fast forward to say 18 months, ideal world scenario, Rick, you and I catching up again. What does it look like for Group14?
Yeah. 18 months from now, we're going to be in a wide variety of large-scale electric platforms, both on the consumer electronics side and on the automotive side. And so at that point, I think we will see more broad perception of the fact that the silicon battery age is here, and that effectively silicon batteries obsolete traditional lithium ion. And so as fast as the industry can grow and make silicon anode materials, we'll see a transition from traditional lithium ion to silicon batteries. There's really no reason why you'd use a traditional lithium ion battery if silicon batteries are available. And so it's not a trade-off in any way whatsoever. It's advantage in every respect. And so as fast as the industry can scale, we'll see a transition from lithium ion to silicon. It's interesting, way back in the day, first rechargeable batteries were really NiCad batteries. They were quickly replaced by nickel metal hydride batteries. They got replaced by traditional lithium ion batteries. Now I think we'll see that same major shift in technology going from traditional lithium ion to silicon-based batteries. It's going to happen again as quickly as we can scale, and that's going to happen a lot quicker than most people are expecting. So it's going to be a fun ride.
Next 18 months ahead of us. In that case, Rick, what about for the next decade? Where do you see the biggest opportunity for kind of silicon?
Yeah, so our focus is on EVs, just because that's such a huge industry and the volumes are so enormous and the impact is so incredible. But consumer electronics, I think we'll see silicon batteries more quickly adopted in consumer electronics because they fundamentally move faster, right? So the program life cycle on a phone is about a year or two, whereas a car is typically 8 years. So just the pace of being able to absorb these new technologies in consumer electronics is fundamentally quicker. So I think the first thing we'll see is silicon batteries in every consumer device that you have. We already are in some cell phones produced in China with really great results. And our only limitation now is how much material we can make. So as those factories scale, we'll see broader and broader adoption. That's going to shift as our volume continues to grow into EV platforms. And so again, this extreme fast charging is going to completely change the way people think about electrification. And so I can't even imagine the innovations that are come out of this, but maybe it's things like inductive charging at stoplights. So nobody ever has to plug your EV in again. Maybe it is flash charging at the grocery store. Now you go to the grocery store, I have an EV. I go to the grocery store, I can maybe charge for 20 minutes and that's really not that impactful in the big picture. But if I can charge for 5 minutes and fully charge my EV once a week at the grocery store, charge anxiety completely gone, range anxiety completely gone. And so all the benefits of electrification dominate. And I think we'll see the true recognition that internal combustion is obsolete. And then we'll see growth in other industries. Aviation is electrifying. It is, as I've said, it's difficult to electrify a 747. But for regional transport, it's a fantastic option. If you're going a couple 100 kilometers, why not electrify those planes? They're quiet, they're inexpensive to operate. Extreme fast charging allows that. You got to turn a plane quick to get a return on it. Planes don't make money sitting on the ground. You got to get passengers up in the air. And so if you can turn that plane in 30 minutes, that's a big difference over turning it in, say, 4 or 5 or 6 hours for longer charging. So Extreme fast charging will enable broader electrification of aviation, and we'll see electrification in virtually everything that we use power for. And I think that's the end of the decade. We'll be well into the silicon battery era and recognizing a whole host of new applications we haven't thought of because of the capability of extreme fast charging and the higher energy density. It's going to be pretty cool. When you stop and think that the iPhone's been around for less than 20 years, how quickly that's changed our lives and how we just don't even recognize how fast it's happened. I think we're going to see that same transition with silicon batteries, enabling all kinds of new innovations we haven't imagined yet. It's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm sure for a lot of people as well, it's kind of hard to perceive something until you actually kind of see it and then you believe it. And when you're talking about, the extreme flash kind of charging, kind of 90 seconds, kind of 5 minutes for an EV, you just think that's as convenient as anything, to be fair. And I'm sure there's a lot of misconception for, how far battery technology can go. For sure. Okay. Well, look, just for kind of general picture for, investors, talent, anyone considering joining kind of Group 14, yourself and the journey, what's the message you'd want them to take away about the company's journey, the vision?
Yeah, the silicon battery era is here. It is here, and we're going to see just absolutely incredible, an incredible revolution in energy storage here over the next 3, 4, 5 years. Group 14 is going to be at the lead of that, and the only constraint we have is how fast we can build production facilities. And so that's really our focus today. But it's going to be a really cool ride. Anyone who wants to participate, this is going to be the beginning of a technological revolution. We're really excited about it.
Sounds good. All right, Rick. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Blaze. Good talking with you. Take care.
Take charge.